Hi, I'm Rick Dior, and welcome to my series on the Les Parks book, 15 Diversions for Snare Drum. Here's the original. So this is a classic book, and it's a book I worked on when I was a little kid. I was probably 12 years old going through this, and at the time I was doing some drum corps, and Les Parks was very active around New Jersey. He worked with the Hawthorne Caballeros, which was a senior drum corps, and the Garfield Cadets and some other groups. He was also the founder, with Bobby Thompson, of a fife and drum group called the Sons of Liberty. And Les Parks graduated from Juilliard in 1950, and he studied with Mo Goldenberg, who was the percussionist with the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra. And of course, Morris Goldenberg wrote Modern School for Mallets and Modern School for Snare Drum and other great books, lots of snare drum solos. He's sort of a legend in the percussion world. But so is Les Parks, and he's not talked about much anymore. There's not much about him online. Did meet him a few times when I did some drum corps. I was at some exhibitions where the Hawthorne Caballeros were playing. The senior corps would play exhibitions, and then the junior corps would compete. And he was there. Very nice gentleman. You know, anything you can find on him online. You can see him playing some with Sons of Liberty, but not a lot. I wish there was more. So we're trying to remember him here. That's one thing I like to do on this channel, is kind of remember sort of the masters of these styles that have been forgotten. And he's certainly one. Him and Bobby Thompson. Now, they had a grip that they developed called the Thompson grip, and it was sort of a different thing where it relied on the index finger more than the thumb. I use a lot of thumb when I play, and it curled this finger under the fourth finger. So it was a strange grip. It doesn't work well for me because I do a lot of drum set playing traditional, but it certainly worked well for them. And if you played with one of his groups, everybody had to look exactly the same. They were like, you couldn't even audition if you didn't use their technique. I heard stories about it from one of my teachers, Walter Kelly, in the drum corps that I marched with. So, you know, that's a very interesting thing. A little bit like marching bands are now. Everybody's got to play the same, a little bit tight and a little bit, you know, arms and wrists. But as you know, I play pretty loose. And the whole goal for playing these things is to play loosely and relaxed. Now, the drum I'm using is a giant field drum here. It's a Pearl Philharmonic 16 by 16 African Mahogany field drum. It's a giant drum. It's got a real big, thick sound. I'm using a lot of muffling since it's so loud. It rings a lot, and I don't want to overload my single microphone here that I'm using. The sticks I'm using are these rosewood sticks that I make, and they're heavy, 86 grams. So all these things keep me in shape. I'm an old guy here. When you're older, when you're 60 and older, things start going south. So my whole goal with doing these kinds of things all the time is to keep my body in shape. Always. So I do a little more than I have to, a little bit of heavy lifting here. It's like lifting weights. So I can last a long time. My chops, luckily, are still good, and I think it's because I've done this and I play really relaxed. It's definitely an advantage to play traditional grip because the thumb and your index finger are doing most of the work, okay? And these lower fingers, which aren't as strong, are just supporting the stick, catching it. All right, so when you play match grip, you can play clean rolls. The difference is that you're using these three fingers to move the stick instead of these fingers, which are stronger. Okay, so you might want to consider learning traditional grip if you don't do it. I have a lot of videos on it, and there's a lot of great players who do it still. But you can watch my teacher, Joe Morello, play it online. You can watch Buddy Rich. All those guys have amazing traditional grip technique. So we'll talk about this solo now. One other thing that I do, there's two ways to play these rolls. You can play them as written, so you're leaving space between the eighth note and the roll, or you can play them the John Pratt and Charles Wilcoxon way, where you're connecting them to the beat. Now, Wilcoxon wrote those with a drag before the roll, And Pratt wrote them with a 16th note before the roll, and then they just put 13th stroke or 15th stroke or whatever it was. So that looks like and sounds like this. So here is a 7, as opposed to. Now the way that's written, and it's written here, is that would be a triplet-based 32nd note roll. All right. The way that Pratt and Wilcoxon does them, that's a 32nd note roll. So if I do 16ths, now if I do a triplet-based roll, so that's cool and all, but it's fast. And if you watch these guys play in the old days, these groups, they connected everything. So this is just a notation thing, and you can play it any way you want, but it'll sound better when the rolls are interconnected. Hope you understand that. So let's just play the first 4 lines. We've got a lot of rolls here, and I'll play it both ways. First one, I'll play it as written. 1, 2, 1, 2. Now I'll play it with the connectivity of the roll. So in other words, the 16th note before the roll with a 16th note underlayment. So the roll will be slower. 1, 2, 1, 2. So I hope you're hearing that, okay? 2 different approaches. They're both legitimate, but I usually play the connected roll because, again, I think that sounds better. And just because it's written a certain way doesn't mean it's not interpreted a different way. And the rudimental world, especially the old stuff with the notation, is full of that kind of thing. So let's look at the solo now. This one is pretty much the easiest one in the book. These definitely get harder. By the end, it's pretty intense. So most all of them are 2-pagers, but I think the last one is just 1 page. So they're very short. They're like a minute or so. And depending on the tempo you do, they can be even shorter. Now, the tempo I'm using here is 114. That's a good tempo for this. You could do it faster. Like I've done these as fast as like 122. I'll play a little of that for you. 1, 2, 1, 2. So that feels great, but then when you get to the second page and you have like that 5th line down and you have to do this. All of a sudden that 7, that's definitely a triplet-based roll, 32nd note triplet-based roll. You got to squeeze that in there. So that doesn't sound great. So that's why I'm doing a little bit slower tempo. But anywhere from 110 to 120 is all good. That's a good tempo. You can do them slower, of course, but these are the performance tempos. So only a few difficult things in this solo. The first one is the 3rd line of the 2nd page. 1, 2, 1, 2. So that's a little bit of a tricky sticking. So watch out for that. The other tricky sticking happens 4 lines from the end, and I'll play that for you. 1, 2, 1, 2. So you see that. Be real careful there. And finally, the last line of the whole piece is tricky. 1, 2, 1, 2. So we have this pata fla fla here, 2 measures from the end. That that's a tricky little sticking there. That's not one of the original rudiments. It is one of the PAS rudiments though. Okay, so those are the real difficult things. Other than that, pretty straightforward if you've got experience playing some Wilcoxon, difficult Wilcoxon, and Pratt, then this shouldn't be too hard, this first solo. So if you're just getting started, I would look at the Nard book or the William F. Ludwig book or the Haskell Haar book. Those are good beginning rudimental books. Later on, though, you might want to look at the All-American Drummer. That's a Wilcoxon book. It's got 150 solos. I have all those recorded here on this page. There's a whole playlist of those. And then Modern Rudimental Swing Solos, the other Wilcoxon book. That's a great book. I also have that recorded, as well as the Pratt books, 14 Modern Contest Solos, and then the new Pratt book, which was the second one, and then Solos for Advanced Drummers, which is the third Pratt book. That one's very difficult. So those are the big rudimental books that I use to teach, as well as this Les Parks book, 15 Diversions for the snare drum. So we'll see you next time with the next solo from this series.